we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Bass and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, April 15th, 2024, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. I'm your host, Payson, the Cinemaster Johnson. Exciting show tonight. We are going to be reviewing Alex Garland's new film, Civil War, as well as the new Nicolas Cage Shudder horror film, Arcadian. Two exciting films, lots to talk about with both of them. I say we jump right in with our first movie tonight, Civil War. This is Alex Garland's latest film, director of Ex Machina, Annihilation, Men, also writers of many other films, whether it's Dread or 28 Days Later or the incredibly underrated Sunshine. This is a movie that stars Kirsten Dunst as a journalist who is chronicling the movie set quite a few years in the future, but a second civil war in America has broken out as Texas and California have joined forces to create the Western Liberation Force in order to in order to take control of America. They have seceded from America and they have started their own civil war. The President of the United States, played by Nick Offerman, has stayed in power for a third term, and the Western forces are making their storm on Washington, D.C., and Kirsten Dunst plays a journalist named Lee who is chronicling this event. She is trying to get to Washington, D.C. for one final interview from the president to get like a statement before he either steps down to surrender or continues to fight back. She is accompanied by her boyfriend, who is also a journalist, played by Wagner Moura, and an up-and-coming journalist by the name of Jesse, played by Kaylee Spaney, who's having an incredible moment right now in her career. She's someone, her character kind of idolizes Kirsten Dunst's character. Lee is a very renowned journalist. She's been very successful at her job, and Jesse wants to be someone that can look up to her, that takes inspiration from her, and is able to do the job like she has been able to do in the past. And they're also accompanied by Stephen McKinley Henderson, who plays kind of like a veteran journalist who is accompanying Lee, Jesse, and Joel. So yeah, Alex Garland as a filmmaker, I really, really like. I think Ex Machina is one of my favorite films of the 2010s. Easily a top 5 sci-fi movie of the 2010s. I think it's just about as perfect of a sci-fi thriller as you can get. Incredible performances by Donald Gleason, Alicia Vikander, and Oscar Isaac. I think what that movie has to say about masculinity and about how you can't trust anyone, I think is really, really great. Annihilation, another phenomenal movie. Men is a movie I'm not quite as high on, but I don't dislike it as much as most people do. But yeah, looking at the trailers for this one, it looked like this was going to be a much bigger production than Alex Garland was used to. I believe the budget was a lot bigger on this movie than it was his previous movies. I want to say this movie was made for around $15 million, which is pretty expensive even for an A24 movie. The movie, they usually like to keep their movies on the down low. And seeing this movie, I understand why this movie had the budget it needed, because it is telling quite a really big sweeping story that goes through that has a lot of scope. And hearing a movie nowadays that it's set in the future and it's about what if a second civil war happened, you might hear that premise and you might kind of roll your eyes or even get a little scared. Is this really the movie we need right now? Where admittedly, and this is not a political show by any means, but I think this is not a factually incorrect statement to say our country is a little divided right now. I think everyone is a little heated politically, but Alex Garland is not interested in saying one side or not is correct or anything. Alex Garland is interested in showing what war does to the people in its country and how those people are affected in their everyday lives. I think some of the most effective scenes in this movie are where we see our characters go to different settlements or go to different camps and see how all the characters on either side are living their lives, are trying to make it through day by day, how they are all struggling because no one gets any benefit from war on any side, and that is what Alex Garland is the most interested in. I've seen a lot of people say this is a super political movie, and I totally understand that. But I think what this movie is really trying to go for is this movie is really going for an anti-war message and showing how, look, this in no way affects anyone positively. There's no like good side in this. America's not portrayed as the good guys. The Western forces are not portrayed as the good guys. Each side is shown doing bad things throughout the entire movie. And throughout the film, we are really just following these four characters as they're trying to get from one part of the country to the other part of the country in one piece in order to do their job. And I think centering this movie on journalists, I think, is probably the best thing it could have done to show that, like, look, we are just showing this war. We're not putting like a different like stance on it, and we're not putting like our angle on it. And I think that's what the characters are trying to do as well, because you see that Jessie, played by Kaylee Spaney, one of the big lessons she gets from Lee is I think Kirsten Dunst is excellent in this movie because she plays this part really reserved, almost to the point where like she feels tired and she feels worn down, like this war has really affected her. And you can clearly tell how maybe she doesn't have the love for journalism as she once did. And you have this character in Jessie who's very much like bright-eyed and very much like, how do you do this? How do you find so much wonder and how do you always feel inspired? And just Kirsten Dunst is just so good at saying, like, if that's what you take, good on you, but like this is not where I am in my life right now. And I think there are some weird trolls online that tried to tell me that like Kirsten Dunst is not a good actress. I do not understand this because once again I think this is a really, really great performance. Kaylee Spaney is also really good. If you saw Priscilla last year, she was the title character in that. And I think she was excellent. And once again, I think she's really just showing that she's just one of those great up and coming actresses. And yeah, whenever you put Stephen McKinley Henderson in a movie, I'm always going to be excited. Like I think he's one of those great like that guys in movies right now, where like every time you see his face, like even if you don't know his name, you're like, oh, it's that guy, and he always just makes a movie better. Like he's the drama teacher in Lady Bird. He's the guy with like the crazy eyes in Dune. He plays Beau's therapist in Beau is Afraid. Really great track record of movies, and once again, I think he just adds like a layer of heart where like, even though he's been doing this the longest, he is not as worn down as Kirsten Dunst's character. And I think that really, I think that layer of optimism really helps the movie. Wagner Moore is also good in it. I don't think he was like amazing. I think of all the characters in this film, I think his character was the one where I kind of struggled to really find like the purpose of why he was there at the end of the day, aside from being just like an emotional companion of Lee. But he wasn't bad by any means. But yeah, watching the trailer, you might think you're going to be getting like a lot of like really hard to watch battle scenes of like people going in like close quarters and like being gunned down. And while there is definitely a few action scenes, and I think Alex Garland directs those really, really well. Like I just want to touch on this. I think this is maybe Alex Garland's best film from a directorial standpoint. Like I think the way how he mixes the sound in all these action scenes, whether you're watching all the journalist film watch like a storming of a hospital, or towards the end where you are in Washington D.C. and you are watching the city get invaded. I think the way how he mixes sound, I think the way how he is able to shoot the action by showing in a way of seeing how big it is, but never making it feel like good or making it feel cool. I think that's always the tricky part when you are making an action movie like this, especially one that has such real world implications. You do not want to glorify it in any way. And I think Alex Garland does a really good job of walking that fine line here. So yeah, I think his direction is really, really great, but that's not the majority of this film. I think the majority of this film, to explain the story, is we are watching these 4 characters go from scenario to scenario, meeting different characters, and just seeing how all of their lives have been affected by the war. Some of them end up going poorly. Like, there's always this like lingering sense that our characters are always in danger. But like, some of my favorite moments are where like, okay, there's one scene early on in the movie where our characters are trying to get gas, and we stumble on a gas station that's been taken by the Western forces, and it seems like they might attack our characters. We see that they have like bodies like surrounding the gas station for like a warning, and then we eventually learn that like, yeah, they're just going to let these journalists go because the journalists haven't really picked a side. They're not there to fight, and we see that like not everyone is there to take out everyone. I think there are just these really great human moments. There is this one scene, like I said, where we see a hospital get raided, and afterwards we have a really great scene between Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney, especially at night, where they just sort of explain where they are in life. And like, there are a lot of these character moments where you just have the characters just talking and slowing down and discussing where their lives are at this point, and I can definitely see some people getting bored with that. I really liked it. Like, I think the reason why this movie works for me is how character driven Alex Garland wanted to make this film. Like, I can definitely see some people even getting annoyed that the movie doesn't really take a stance politically, especially with a movie that has such a political concept. But for me, I just think this was such an interesting concept of him deciding, I just want to focus on the characters and what war does to everyone. I just think that was a really, really bold choice. I think one scene that I think I need to talk about, if you've seen the trailers, there is a part where all of our major characters end up driving into a small neighborhood that has essentially been taken over by a rogue soldier played by Jesse Plemons. We don't get an explanation as to what side Jesse Plemons' character is fighting for. All we know is this guy is mentally unstable. He has a screw loose, and it is one of the scariest and most tensest scenes I think I've seen in a movie in a long while. Like, it starts out a little humorous because I think Jesse Plemons has such a great way of like towing the line between fear and comedy. Like, if you've seen his role in Breaking Bad, I think that is the character of Todd, of like someone that doesn't know how insane he is but can like snap at any moment, and I think this character is really, really great at that. And yeah, just he comes in for one scene, and I think it really shows how far certain people in this country have gone and how far certain people in this country have fallen, that that they're willing to go to this point. You see how scared every single character is at that point for their lives. And I think of all the scenes in this movie, I think that was easily my favorite scene, just because of how tense and how just like you are at the edge of your seat while watching that scene. I think if I were to say, if I had one major complaint about this film, thinking about the ending, I'm not sure it really nailed what it was trying to go for the ending. I can't say, I can't really get into it without spoiling, but I think the main characters of this movie make a choice that is so ambivalent and so ambiguous that I think like, and they're throughout the entire movie, you're sort of like at this point where the characters are supposed to be ambivalent because they're just there to report on the news and see what's going on and get the information out to the people, let them know what is happening in this country. And for the majority of that, I like that. But I think towards the end, I think one, it tries to play a little bit too many, like it tries to tug a little bit too many emotional heartstrings, and it's maybe not too effective with that. And the last note the movie leaves you on, I think, was the only point where I was like, what was really the point of doing that? And I'm still struggling after a few days seeing the movie, trying to decide what Alex Garland was trying to get at with that ending. I hate to like be that guy saying like, oh, I didn't really get what the filmmaker was going for, so I have to consider that a fault. But I just think the ending could have been handled a little bit better. And I think with how the situation with the president resolves, it really just left my head scratching of like, what was Alex Garland going for there? Once again, I think it was really effective that Garland was trying to remain apolitical. Like, I think one of the most effective things in this movie is there are no current day politicians that are mentioned by name in this movie. We don't really have like the words Republican or Democrat said, and I think Alex Garland does a really good job at towing that line. But I really do wish it did have a stronger conclusion. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to go, oh yeah, I should probably say, here at Cinemaster's Reviews, we do rate movies on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being awful, 10 being absolutely incredible. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10, I think I'm going to give it a very good score of an 8.5. I think this was a great movie, great dystopian film about what a modern-day Civil War can be and how scary that is. Once again, I don't think it does everything extremely well. I think maybe the script could have used one last write-up, but like I think the direction is incredible. I think the performances are great, and there was a misleading article that came out that this is going to be Alex Garland's last movie he directs. Shout out to my friend Tim, who told me that like, hey, he was definitely it was definitely a misleading headline there. He's just not going to be directing a movie maybe for a little bit. He's going to go back to writing for a little, but this is not his last movie. But if this was his last movie, I think it's quite a big statement to go out on, and I'm happy that this isn't his last movie because Alex Garland is a very good filmmaker, and I'm happy we are going to have directors like him working today that put out interesting movies like this. If you get the chance to go see it in theaters, I really, really hope you do see it. If you're worried that, I'm not sure I want to watch it in such a divisive time like this, I don't think it's the movie you think it's going to be. I think it's a really, really interesting film that you are really, really going to enjoy. But yeah, I say we jump right into our second review of the night. That being Arcadian. This is a very small horror movie directed by Benjamin Brewer. It is a Shudder original that got the theatrical release. Always fun when Shudder puts their movies out in theaters. Really simple premise. We kind of like Civil War, but not quite like Civil War. We are also in a dystopian time where many people are living on in different settlements. But as opposed to Civil War, where we don't get a ton of backstory about how the war gets started, we just know that certain sides have sided with each other and wars broken out. This one we don't get a lot of explanation, but we know that there are these sort of alien monsters that now roam the earth and just kind of feed on humans, and the remaining humans are just trying to live on their own and live every day for their survival. We follow a father played by Nicolas Cage, and who is looking after his two kids. And aside from that, it is a pretty simple and pretty effective horror movie about survival and trying to get by from from day-to-day life. If there is one thing I can say about this movie is super shabby in its direction and its filmmaking. I could not find the exact budget of the film, but I can tell this movie was made for very cheap because this is a movie that's trying to do a lot with its creature effects and its horror elements, but it's trying to do a lot with a very, very little budget. And sometimes that isn't the greatest, but a lot of times, whether it's Sam Raimi's Evil Dead or some early John Carpenter movies or even some early Wes Craven movies, where you can see in terms of horror, a smaller budget sometimes makes a better movie. And I think a lot of the direction is helped in this movie by the fact that you do have a very, very shabby feel to it. I think this movie uses shaky cam really, really well in its horror scenes when you have the characters running from these monsters, or even there's this scene where Nicolas Cage and one of his sons is down in the cave and the rocks are starting to fall, and you have this moment where what is going on? You think there are monsters in there, and you're right there with the characters where your vision is obscured as well, so you're not entirely sure, and it always just adds a little bit of uneasiness. And I think that was really, really effective here. The one thing I will say is, while there are definitely some scenes where the lighting in this movie is very, very low and it's a very, very dark movie, can often be tough to see. And while you can definitely tell the lighting in this movie is at points, that is an artistic choice just to sort of it's an artistic choice to make it scarier. There are some scenes where just you have two characters talking and they're in a dim room and you can barely see anything. And at that point, I'm like, guys, you got to learn how to light your scene better. You can only hide behind your budget limitations so much when I'm watching a regular scene that's supposed to be like an exposition scene, and I'm being distracted by the fact the lighting is so bad. That is where it starts to become a little annoying. So yeah, I think the lower budget, I think this movie kind of works around it, but there are definitely some points where you can tell, yeah, the director probably could have used a little bit more money making this. One thing I do want to say is this movie does use a lot of creature effects. Most of the creatures are CG, but the movie does a really good job at keeping them obscured or in low dim lighting, so that way we don't get like a ton of shots where we're just looking at the creatures. The first scene where we get like not like the first look at these monsters, but like the first time we see like what the monsters can do, all we see is like a monster's leg and a monster's arm as it just peeps out from the door, and that was my favorite scene in the movie. And I think the director Benjamin Brewer had a really good grasp of what it takes to make a really thrilling and scary horror movie, because that reveal I think was really, really well done. I want to talk about Nicolas Cage. He is one of my, like, this is not an unpopular opinion, like, he is one of my favorite actors working today. Whether even in bad movies, he always has that chance to make that movie better and make that movie more entertaining to watch. And I think one of my favorite things about this movie is this seems like a movie that would be a really like a movie where Nicolas Cage would be giving an extremely over the top performance. But that's not what he's doing here. He's actually pretty subdued. He's pretty laid back. He's someone that just like you get the sense that he doesn't really care whether or not he makes it to the next day, or he does care, but it's mainly just because he wants to protect his kids and make sure they are able to make it day by day through this apocalypse. And I think it's really fun seeing him in this role where he's not dial up to 11 like we know that he can do at all times. I think one of the weaker elements of this movie is the fact that it does sideline his character for a good chunk of this movie. This movie is only 90 minutes long, but he's probably out of it for maybe like 30 to 45 minutes, and I think that's kind of disappointing, because while the kids are interesting, they're not like super interesting, and you can tell that this was a movie that was made for Nicolas Cage, and I do wish that the movie would have had more of him in it. Once again, I do just want to say the runtime. This is a really quick 90-minute movie, and I think it uses its runtime really, really well. Super short and sweet, doesn't keep you for too long. Once again, this movie does just kind of drop you into the apocalypse. It's not super concerned with how did we get here, how did humanity get so shrunk down. It's more concerned about like, here are our characters, this is how they're living day to day, this is the threat they have, now let's watch them try to survive. And I think that's really, really effective, especially with a movie with this short of a runtime. It doesn't try to like add extra layers of fat. Yeah, I think it's pretty well done. If I were to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give it a solid 7. This is by no means a great movie. Once again, it does have some flaws. I do think some of the filmmaking is a little bit off, and I do wish it would have utilized Nicolas Cage a little bit more. But for what we got, I think you have a really cool monster movie about these characters just trying to survive day to day, and I think it's an effective horror movie. If you are a fan of horror movies, I would recommend going to see this in theaters. When it comes to streaming, I think this would be a nice, decent one to check out. Shudder tends to put out really, really good stuff, and I think this is a really great one that they can add to their library. But yeah, that does bring us to the end of our show tonight. Thank you for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. We're putting out a lot of great content. Next week, we are going to be reviewing Abigail, the new horror movie from the makers of Ready or Not and Scream 6, as well as The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I really hope I got that title right. It's the new Guy Ritchie movie with Henry Cavill. Really fun trailer there. Pretty excited for both those movies. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and as always, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.